So we're going to go through a little bit about PAF, Premium Australia Foods. Scott mentioned I've been in retail for a long time. We used to have a shop, my wife and I, in a shop near Queen Vic Market in the city of Melbourne. And about 2006, we took it onto eBay. We got kicked off eBay about 4 times in our first year because we didn't really get things like feedback and answering questions and stuff like that. So we made every mistake possible, but we finally got it right and we did pretty well. And then, as Scott said, I was with Channel Advisor. I worked with Phil for a bit as well. We did some online market consulting for a while. And about 3 years ago, there was this big thing around food, and Australia's got great food, and it's going to be the mining boom to the dining boom, and we're going to be the food bowl of Asia. And the reality is that we only make about, I think it's enough food for probably about 60 million people, and even if you double that, it's 120 million, so you're looking at about 10% of the population of China. So the reality is we're never going to be we're never going to be the food bowl to Asia, but we can be the delicatessen to Asia. We can have that premium, that upper end food, and it's a really big market for that. On, what day did we start here? Wednesday. So Ben from Australia Post, he talked a little about the opportunities in Southeast Asia. He mentioned also the middle class. It was a really important aspect, a really important category, and we'll go into it a little bit more detail as to why they're so important. I'll talk a little bit how we engage with social media over in China. It's a little bit different. You're probably aware Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like that are all blocked. So there's other ways that you need to get into the market there. And ideally, I'd like to give you guys some takeaways, some things if you are interested in getting your products to China or even just dealing with food in general that might be able to help you as well. So before we start, is anyone who's sort of exporting to China at the moment? Anyone sending anything back the other way? Everyone I meet seems to buy from China. So I've got a couple who are dealing with China, selling products. Is it food related or is it? No. Fair enough. All right. So why do we send food into China? There was the infant milk scandal, and a lot of kids unfortunately died as a result of this. Food scandals in China are really common. The food practices aren't what we have here in Australia. And it's something we sort of take for granted. If you remember earlier this year, there was the raspberries or the frozen berries that were contaminated allegedly. And the berries themselves were from China, were from Chile, but have gone to China and have been around water that may have been infected. So we really take for granted Australia's high food safety and high food security that we have here. The other aspects, so there's issues around what food they will trust and not eat. China has recently moved hundreds of millions of the population out of poverty and into the cities. China's slowly moving into a consumer-based economy, and as these millions of people come off the farms and out of the countries and into the towns and the cities, that's when they also get access to more income. And it's when they've got access to more income, they're also getting better educated and they're more keen to buy food that they see as safe and trustworthy. Food's also a really good way of showing off, and within the Chinese culture there is a sort of one-upmanship. If I buy a BMW, my neighbour's going to probably try and buy a BMW the next day as well. There's just this sort of, keeping up with the Joneses type approach. So food is a really great way of being seen to be luxury and showing off. It's also a great gift as well. We sell olive oil in China, and the way we present it is a bit more like your Penfolds grain. So it's in a nice wooden box. It's got the straw behind it, and it sells for typically about about the equivalent of 60 Australian dollars for a 1 litre bottle of olive oil. So if anyone's bought olive oil here and you pay about $12, that being said, it's not always that margins, but there are the ability to get luxury items like that. So just to highlight the some of the food scares. So this, I don't want to say it's my favourite food scandal, but it's kind of one that always sticks with me. So there was 44,000 tonnes of fake beef. It was actually pork, but it had been treated with a whole lot of chemicals, basically painted in a way to look like beef. And sadly, these scandals happen a lot. Just recently, the provider of the burgers for McDonald's in China had an issue. And so for about a week, the Big Mac in Shanghai was the lettuce, the special sauce and a bun. They just couldn't get the burgers. So sadly, these things keep happening. It's good for our business, but it's not a great way to be worrying about. So we've been trading online in China for about 18 months. We were on Tmall.com and Tmall HK, and I'll explain the difference a little bit later. If you've met the Alibaba team, downstairs. Tmall is one of their platforms. They've got a few different ones. Tmall is the biggest B2C site marketplace in the world. We're actively engaged in the B2C model, so our food is moved into a Shanghai warehouse. It then goes out to the customer directly as they buy. But as a result of that, we've just been filling some orders for the Radisson Hotel Group. They've been buying our cookies that we have. If anyone had Charlie's cookies, little melting moments, they're really good. My daughter always wants to take a whole box to school, which is always a fight in the morning. But they're now being moved into the Radisson Hotel Group and being used in their executive lounges. So because we've proven ourselves as a B2C, we're now starting to get a bit of interest from the businesses as well. We're also looking to do fresh. We've recently signed on to do Australian beef. We can actually get the beef from Australia to Shanghai. We freeze it. But after that, this is where we have a few issues. And I'll talk about distribution a little bit later. We're also looking to expand onto the other marketplaces that are available. Tmall is very, very good, but there are other marketplaces that are popping up and we'd like to be involved in them as well. Just want to talk quickly about China. It's really easy to get caught up in the numbers around China. There's 1.4 billion people, and a lot of people think, oh my God, that's amazing. And it's incredible. You know, the city, Shanghai's got 22 million people, so it's a little bit less than the population of Australia in one city. And when you go over there and you ride the subway and you're jammed in there with everyone, you really kind of appreciate how nice and open our space is here. But it's pretty hard to stereotype as well. When we first went to China a few years ago, we were told you'll never sell cereal. China don't eat the same way as we do. They won't buy a bowl of muesli. They won't buy jam. They don't eat toast. Yet now we're getting asked, oh, can you get cereal? Can you get jam? So both are probably accurate, but when you've got 1.4 billion people, it's really hard to stereotype. And I think it's really, you know, there's a lot of people come back and they say, oh, I saw this and I heard that, or we've learnt this. And they'll all be true, but you often find the reverse of it can also be true as well. China's evolving rapidly. It's going through a huge, I guess, industrial and cultural revolution at the moment. As I said, they've moved hundreds of millions out of poverty off the farms and into the cities. And with this has become this emerging middle class. And this is really important for us to focus on. This middle class is obviously growing up with a mobile phone. They're very technologically savvy. And they've got access to increased income as well as these food safety concerns we mentioned. The mobile phone, it's really important in China. I was talking to someone yesterday here and they said, I don't even know why we call it a phone anymore. It's almost become the fourth use of the iPhone. And China's interesting because they've had this evolution and drastic improvement so quickly, they've almost forgotten or missed the desktop and the tablet stage. They've just gone straight to the mobile. And that's how they shop, it's how they interact. We'll talk about WeChat. Who's got WeChat in the room? Anyone? Yeah, so WeChat is, we'll talk about, it's a social app that is massive in China. But basically now you meet someone in China, you scan your QR code on WeChat and it's like being invited into their home. You've got all their details, you can follow them like Facebook and Twitter. If you shake the app, you can find dates nearby. It's incredible. So the mobile phone's really important to what's driving their online sales. So I don't want to get too caught up in numbers, but I always find this really interesting. So I'm from Melbourne. Population of 4.2 million. There's 122 cities in China with more population than Melbourne. Now the spending power, you can work out there. I did this in my mind the other day. So it's 12,506,415,890,000 RMB. So divide that by about 5 and that's the Australian dollar equivalent of their purchasing power. This is where all those cities are. Importantly, you'll notice a lot of these cities are what we call Tier 2 or Tier 3 cities. So we're all pretty familiar with Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Hangzhou. Where we're seeing all this growth and interest in the emerging middle class is the second and third tier cities. These sort of cities that are away from the eastern seaboard and inland a little bit more. And just so we don't get completely caught up with all the numbers, there's one city in China, Chongqing, which has got more people in it than Australia has altogether. So Australia's population is around 24 million. There's one city in there, and there it is right there in the middle, Chongqing. So incredible. So let's talk about this middle class, because this is who we target, middle class and above. And this is the emerging middle class, those that can afford to buy premium Australia food. This is the most confident, independent class within China. These Typically, they're all single children. They have recently changed their law in China that if you're both children of a single family, you can then have 2 babies if you marry someone else from the single child. Typically, this hasn't been taken up a lot at the moment from what we've seen. There's a lot of people still just having the 1 baby, which may or may not change in the next few years. A lot of these middle class are also very Western. A lot of them have travelled a lot more than their parents and their grandparents. A lot of them studied over here in Australia as well. So they've come over to Australia, they might have gone to Melbourne Uni, they've got an affiliation with Western taste, Western flavours, they understand our culture and our lifestyle, and they very much like our blue sky, our green grass, that space that we have here that they don't have back in China. Typically, they're looking for better taste, so they seek emotional attachment through having a higher status, and this is something that makes them feel good. This is what we see, as I said on that map before, we see them stronger on the inland cities rather than the eastern seaboard cities, and this is connecting to as they come away from more rural environments and move into these cities. Typically, 68% of the middle class have got access to the internet compared to about 57% of the overall population. If you remember on Wednesday, Ben Franzi from Ozpost said 96% of Australia has access to the internet. The other important aspect of the middle class is they're heavily influenced by what we call key opinion leaders or KOLs, and these might be celebrities or chefs or anyone who's on social media in China, and they might post a picture of themselves with a product or talk about using a product, and what you then see afterwards is a huge sales spike or huge interest in these products. Very, very much, they're really leaders, and you can actually buy their opinions for about 20,000 RMB, so that's 4,000 or 5,000 Australian dollars, and they'll sort of tweet or put comments out about your products and really endorse them for you. So I don't know if you can sort of see this clearly, but this sort of details this middle class, and as this sort of the furthest one from me, I guess that's the furthest right-hand side. So it starts off, 2012, and you can see by 2022 we've got a middle class that's expanded greatly, and their purchasing power that comes from that is astronomical as well. These slides will be available as well. I don't know how Phil sort of does that. I think he puts them online in the presentation sections, but they'll be there for you to have a look at as well. So the online space in China, I said we're on Tmall, which is the Alibaba platform. Online space is really dominated by marketplaces in China. You typically don't have brand stores, or you don't go to sort of a department type store in China. You go to these online marketplaces. So the population, as I said, is about 1.4 billion, about 600 million of these online, and they add about 32 million new internet users each year. So again, the population of Australia and then some are joining the online space every year. You can see the numbers there, 9.9 trillion RMB, which is the Chinese currency, and it's growing at about 21% year on year. So there's huge growth, huge potential. A lot of this comes back to access to products. We find a lot of products can get to the eastern seaboard pretty well. Online is a great way of actually opening up the country, and I'll show you our sales plot map a little bit later, and if you remember that first map we looked at where it had all the cities inboard, and that's where that emerging middle class is, and that's also where we're seeing a lot of the sales take up for us. 14% of the Chinese population will buy something every day online, and this is compared to about 5% of the global average. Alibaba, as I said, is a leading online platform marketplace in China, and it's got over 50% of the online sales. So you can see there the Tmall with the little cat logo. I'm going to say it's horribly, but the mall sound in China is basically saying cat. Have I got that right? Someone in the room can correct me. No? JD.com started off in Beijing, basically just servicing the Beijing region. It's now expanded into China nationally. It's seeing huge increases as a result. It's got about 21%. We're going to focus as well as a business from us on Amazon China. It's only got 1.5% market share, but they've got a really engaged database of Westerners and expat community who appreciate the Amazon brand, they trust Amazon, and they know the products are on there are going to be genuine. And the other one, second bottom, is Yihaodian or YHD, and it's 51% owned by Walmart, and it's making a big push into food as well. YHD started off in Shanghai and is now doing similar to what JD did and is expanding. JD operates a little bit differently to Tmall. With Tmall, we have to do all the work. We have to warehouse it. We have to do live chat. We have to do translation. We set the price. With JD, we basically would move our stock into their warehouse and they do everything for us. They also take 20% commission, but they're doing a lot more for you. So, as I said before, people are often buying online for brands that reflect their status and their taste. It's a really big thing to be able to show off and say, I've got this luxury item, I'm eating this luxury food, I'm feeding the best food to my children or my kids. They're not shopping for price, and this is a really important thing for us because our food, we're never going to be the cheapest on food. It's just not, even if we wanted to be, we couldn't do it. We looked at what they're selling, avocados for in China, and if we go to Coles and Woolies and you pay $2 an avocado for here, and they're over in China, they probably get 6 or 7 for the same price. So we'll never compete on price, but luckily for us, when they're buying online, they're looking for quality as a main motivator. They're looking for stuff they can't get in store. They're looking for things that they can't get in their hometown. They're also shopping for that convenience and being able to buy in the morning on the subway and have it delivered in the afternoon to your house. I mentioned online gives you the best access to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, and these are because they're struggling to find those goods that they really need and they want. So the top 10 e-commerce cities, this is, I can't remember who did this. This isn't our top 10, but this is top 10 in sort of e-commerce sales in China. Shenzhen, Guangzhou are both sort of southern cities, sort of around they're just north of Hong Kong. Guangzhou is where Alibaba is, the head office of Alibaba's there, so it's a bit like the Silicon Valley, if you want, of China. So it's no wonder it's number 3 there. Interesting, Beijing, Shanghai, obviously huge cities, 4 and 5. And I'd be interested if, the next 5 cities, if people in the room have heard of them. And that's really where we see a lot of our growth. So this is our sales plot map graph. So everywhere there's a little red circle is basically where we've had a sale. And this is a little bit old, so I'm hoping we've got more red dots now, but even one of these dots typically represents a city of at least 10 million people. So you see that we're getting the eastern seaboard, we're getting Shanghai, Guangzhou, up north Beijing and Tianjin, but we're really getting increased interest when we go into China, away from that eastern seaboard, and that's been really pleasing for us because that's what we hoped would happen, and that's what is happening. We thought initially that one, I don't know the name of the city, but right out on the border out near Kazakhstan, we thought that might have been a bit of a, not true. However, China is very worried about its borders and has, if you look at the history of China, there's been a lot of invasions, a lot of people have come and attacked them, and they're very conscious of that now. So they do have a lot of protection, a lot of government, a lot of military installations up around these borders. So it's not uncommon for them to be someone up there buying some of our macadamias or our olive oils or cookies as well. So to sell online in China on Tmall.com or JD, you need to have a Chinese registered entity. You need to have products that are registered in China. It's quite a process to go through. It can often take, if I met a food provider today, it'd probably be about 4 months before we could actually sell their product in China with a legal registration. You typically also pay a deposit to Tmall, and it's usually in the tens of thousands of dollars, and you don't get that money back unless you leave the platform. So that price is in RMB, so tens of thousands of RMB you'll be paying to them, and they keep that in a bank account as a sort of security, and if you muck up or you don't do refunds or returns, they'll take their money away from that. So they're always protecting their customer. There are other alternatives sort of opening up as well. So this is if your products are in China and registered. The online platforms are aware that the Chinese consumer is really after international goods, and so they're opening up these sort of online international marketplaces. So Tmall HK is one that we're on. Essentially, it's a Hong Kong-based website that allows us as an international business to sell to Chinese consumers directly without the need to have all the registrations in place. JD, the website I mentioned before, they've got a similar one called JD Worldwide where they buy the food direct from the Australian consumers or Australian manufacturers or the products that you might make here. And Yihaodian, they've got their own one as well. So you don't require a Chinese registered entity or the registration for the products, but you still need to pay a bond. So when you start with Tmall HK, it's about 25,000 US dollars as a bond. So before you've even sold a product, you're in the red 25K. So just to expand on this a little bit more, it's very tiny, I'm sorry about that, but the Tmall Global platform operate your business locally, however you fulfill your orders internationally. You can also fulfill your orders from Hong Kong. Technically it's a special autonomous region, so it's part of China, but it's not part of China. Or you can have your products in what's called a bonded warehouse. So a bonded warehouse is essentially a warehouse in China where you don't pay duties or tariffs. You're able to move your product into there, and then you can fulfill your distribution from there. For a Chinese citizen to get access to products that would be leaving a bonded warehouse, they would have to register their citizenship ID with the government, and then their citizenship ID is basically limited to about 20,000 RMB of purchases they can do per annum. So it's a little bit of paperwork that goes on in order to make that happen. But Tmall Global, you don't need to have any presence in mainland China. Your operations can be based in China or they can be based overseas, and your stock can be held, should be held abroad or in one of those bonded warehouses. So that's different through the Tmall.com, where you need the entities, you need to show your tax returns, you need to be able to show that you've been trading for some time, and all your stock must be based in China. You've got to be able to prove that. So just to sort of highlight that a little bit more, the Tmall.com option, business and product in China to consumers in China, and then you've got the Tmall HK, the international option, where you can have your business and product outside of China but selling to those within China. Does that make sense? I think I mucked that up a bit, but a few people nodding, so that's good. All right, so let's talk about social media in China. It's sort of the same, but it's different. So there's still a lot of platforms. I mentioned Facebook, banned, Instagram, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. It really depends on who's in control of the Chinese internet that week, I think. The Twitter's banned. LinkedIn's okay, you can usually get access to that. I found Gmail's a bit hit and miss. Typically when you leave Shanghai, everything that you rely on in Australia just disappears. Shanghai's a pretty western city, so it often seems to break the rules a little bit more there. Interesting, we were in Xiamen, which is a city, sort of southern China, and we stayed in this great hotel. The Langham was only a year old, had more marble than you've ever seen in your life. It was amazing. But they had access to all the Western social media, and I was there with a contingent of Australian food and beverage manufacturers. We were on an Austrade mission, and it was like we'd just been given the best ice cream in the world. We could finally, put a photo on Instagram or Facebook. It's amazing what that little satisfaction gave us. But the important thing about social media is China use it a lot more in terms of making a purchase. So if you can imagine all our products go to China, no one over there's ever heard of them. These are brand new products. They've got no brand history. This is a country where they're very nervous about food safety and security. So they're going to go onto social media and they're going to ask their friends about, have you heard about Charlie's Cookies or Red Island olive oil? And it's not just for food, but even for cosmetics or fashion or whatever it might be. So 92% of Chinese netizens consult the social media as part of their buying process, and that's compared with only 72% in the USA. I don't know what Australia's figure is because we don't sort of record enough of that. But the other interesting thing is 42% of the online Chinese community will publish to a micro-blogging site, like a Twitter or a WordPress or something like that, whereas only 10% in the US do. So they're really heavily engaged in social media, not just as reviewing, seeing what my friends are saying, but also publishing reviews. So one thing to be really conscious of is once they're trying your product, you're actually able to continually engage with them, understand more about why they're buying, what their concerns are. With their social media, we talked about WeChat before, but that's got an integrated shopping platform as well. So the WeChat app is actually one of the most powerful apps. If you can basically have we would have a subscription type account on WeChat, and we would push out notifications to those who follow us, and then we're able to link them back into our WeChat store to buy directly from us. So just to highlight some of the differences, so YouTube's banned, eBay it's active but not really. Facebook's banned, LinkedIn you can still get access to. Google's banned, Twitter and WordPress, you can still use WordPress, but there's the Chinese equivalents there. Baidu's are really interesting. It's almost like Google, but not. It's very much the same layout. You still have the maps, you still have shopping, you still have all the same sort of options across the top. You still do paid per click advertising, you still do SEO, but it doesn't quite work the same. So the work you've done in Australia and that you understand can apply, but it's not really the same at all. So, but Baidu is where, the market share is probably about 40 or 50%, might be a little bit higher in terms of the online searches. I'll start there. The other one where a lot of searches start is 360.com. So I talked about WeChat. I think the only real way, if you're never familiar with it, it's Instagram, it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's Tinder, it's WhatsApp, Amazon, and it's all combined and it's on steroids. It's just the most incredible thing. And even in business, when we meet people, we'll scan their QR code relating to their WeChat, and then we'll accept friends. And I've had a lot of our business discussions now are through this WeChat app. So we'll talk to the warehouse manager, our logistics operations, all through WeChat. So it's not emailing, we're not calling, it's all done through this app. So it's as a business, you want to get as many subscribers to your WeChat account as you can, because it's essentially they've invited you into their home, they've given you all this information about them, and you can then use it and start really marketing to them. So it's got over 400 million users. They're all pretty much based in China. I don't think anyone outside of China uses WeChat unless you need or you have some interaction with the country. As I said, really powerful for business, really powerful for friends. They have this dating or find a date type function. You shake your phone and it tells you who else is shaking your phone in an area, and it pops up with these options. So I've told, I've never used it, never decided to give it a go, but no, it's very interesting. It's pretty much a one-stop shop for everything you want to do in China. If you want to find friends or stay in touch with people, it's essential. So if you are going over to China, I recommend you download the WeChat app and start finding some friends. I mentioned before about the importance of key opinion leaders. Is anyone familiar with Bobby the Bear? Yeah, a few people. Lavender Bear from Tasmania. So it's a really interesting story. So it comes from a lavender farm down in Tassie, Bridestow Lavender Estate, and they sell this little purple bear with the leftover lavender for about $30, and you could just walk in and buy it, and there you see, little old grandma just hand making these lavender bears. So a few years ago, a Chinese model, whose name I can't pronounce, posted a photo of herself with this bear on her WeChat account. The price of this bear then went as high as 170 Australian dollars. What happens now, they've got over 70,000 people that have gone to the farm just to buy this bear. They actually limit it to one bear per person per day, and they have security guards that will enforce this. It's not uncommon for a Melbourne University, a Chinese-based Melbourne University student to go down to Tassie, buy the bear, come back home and ship it back home for someone in China. There was 40,000 of these bears sold in 2013. There was over 300,000 fake bears sold in China. And sadly, one of the fake bears was found to have a yeast infection in whatever they put inside it, and the Chinese government, who were already pretty nervous about it, they cracked it and said, and that's it, no more lavender bears. So the sale of lavender bears is now banned in China. It's just incredible. It all started because this one model took a photo and put it up on WeChat. And it's still going on now. If you ever go to Tassie, you'll see this bear. It's like their national, when I was young, Tassie was the apple aisle, and now it's like the lavender bear aisle. It's everywhere you go. And a lot of hotels in Sydney, like the Shangri-La and those that will target Chinese consumers, will have this bear in their gift shop. And it's not selling for 30 Australian dollars. There's different sizes now too. But here it is. So the Tassie government now use Bobby Bear on their tourism page, specifically as a result of this. So we've all got to thank that Chinese model for introducing Bobby Bear to the world. Incredible story. So how do we get our product to China? One thing we find difficult is this concept of market access. So my wife often says to me, why don't we just send all our milk and beef and all our lettuce and everything we've got the best food, why don't we just send it over there? And it's not that easy. Basically the Chinese government will have protocols or blocks around certain products which can and can't be sold or brought into China. And they're very much about protecting the citizens, but also protecting their own local markets as well. So, you can't actually import cold beef, it's got to be frozen beef into the country. To do milk into China, you need to have it inspected here in Australia and then inspected again over in China, and it ends up being sort of a 10-day process. Now, groups like, has anyone heard of Norco Milk? So these guys are pretty local, I think, in sort of northern New South Wales. They're getting their milk into China, and they're sort of one of these 5-year overnight success stories. So they've had the Chinese government quarantine officials come out to their facility here, inspect it, approve it. So everything now when it leaves Australia is ticked off and approved, and then when it goes to China, it goes through those formal protocols. So they've been able to turn what used to be a 10-day inspection process into about a 3-day process, and it took them about 5 years to be able to do that. Now, as a result, the milk that they sell fresh into Shanghai sells for about $9 a litre. When they first shipped over the milk into China, it wasn't ready for the pressures of airplane flight, and the whole milk, all the caps all popped off. So sadly, you know, importing and exporting is a great leveller, we like to say. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are, it's a whole lot of circumstances that can really affect you. So market access is one thing. The duties is another thing. Duties obviously payable. Now, a lot of commotion about the free trade agreement, so that's really great for us, but it's going to take about 4 years to sort of come into effect. And we'd probably rather see more influence on market access. You know, we want to get more products over there. Reducing the duties and tariffs is really good, but we'd love to see more Aussie products being able to get over there. Just on market access, does anyone sell cosmetics here? Yeah. So, ever tried selling cosmetics into China? How'd you go? No good? Yeah. Yeah. So cosmetics would work really well on the international platform where you could service it so from here, but you're on the Tmall platform because you don't have to have the registered product. But China want all cosmetics products to be animal tested. So obviously the rest of the world, we walked away from that many, many years ago. However, China still say you need to have this testing. But they let their local producers not do animal testing. So it's kind of protecting their own little industry in a way to let it build up and catch up whilst keeping all the Western brands out of the country. So it's really interesting sort of market access. The duties vary. I think this is, you know, we're talking about cosmetics. The international model works quite well for that, whereas a registered model is really important for food because you want to have that, you want to have those certificates. You want to be able to endorse yourself and say, CIQ have said yes to this product. Sorry, CIQ is the Chinese Inspection and Quarantine official. With infant powder, is anyone familiar with infant powder? I guess you're all... So everyone says, do you sell infant powder? 2 questions I usually get asked. Do you sell red wine into China? No. Do you sell infant powder into China? No. A lot of red wine in China at the moment, so it's a really heavily saturated market we've seen. The prices they're getting aren't amazing, and a lot of brands that we would see as lower brands here are sort of doing okay over there. So we'd rather have wait and see. With infant powder, the Chinese government in May changed a whole lot of rules and regulations. So there used to be 150 Australian brands of infant powder being sold in China. They changed the rule and said, okay, all the manufacturers need to be registered we need to have officials come out and register the product, register the manufacturing plant. All the brands need to be registered in China, and you have to then pay another certain certificate. So the 150 went down to about 5 overnight. They then changed the rules even further and said you can't have any English writing on the tins. They've all got to be in Chinese now. So if you can imagine infant powder, you know, mass production, you've got the tins all lined up, and now you're told, well, you've got to have all your tins in Chinese. We're not going to let them into the country. And interesting, we got messages through WeChat pretty quickly asking, mothers groups in China were asking us, can we get English written infant powder tins? Because even though they knew the ones were from Australia and they're in Chinese, they just didn't trust it. So it's a really interesting, like the market will find a way to try and get there. So in terms of getting the products to China, so these are sort of the five steps that we really go through. It's clearing customs, it's the local warehousing. It's really important to get paid, and then the distribution, which we've done pretty well. All our products at the moment are ambient, shelf stable, and they've got about a 12-month shelf life, generally speaking. Some are a little bit less, but we've been really cautious with our approach for a number of reasons. But the distribution is something that we'll be focusing on a lot for the next 12 months. So clearing customs is probably the most frightening part of this. We've had one container of food that we sent over that was blocked for a random inspection. We had probably half the stock in that container go off. As a result, it happened, of course, in summer, sitting on the dock in Shanghai, and some of our melting moment cookies sort of melted. So it does happen, and it's, all you can really do is be really prepared. You need to have all your documents in place. It's really best to do pre-registration. So what we've learnt now is you actually send 12 samples of the products over to China as if it was part of a bigger shipment with all the registration, all the labels, all the detail. It gets approved by the CIQ authority, and then you're then able to use that reference when you send your commercial order. So when you send a half a container or a full container of that product over. You really need a China's business partner or a China's agent to help you with this process. There's no point getting into a fight with CIQ, you won't win. I think as Australians, sometimes we get told no and we think, oh, there's a loophole here somewhere, we must be able to just change it. I think it's that convict sort of way in all of us, But in China, if they say no, that's the rule, then it's particularly the importation. And if you're an employee or a Chinese citizen who works for the CIQ, this is a really good job. It's a government job, it pays pretty well. You're going to be a very risk-adverse employee. You don't want to risk losing this job. You don't want to risk, having to go back to the family and explain that I'm no longer in this great job. So they're not going to bend over for you. They're not going to take a risk and think, oh, well, you're missing this one document, or this T isn't crossed, we'll just let it through. So that's why it's really important, anytime you send anything to China, is to do a small sample, test it out, then get your accreditation, and then you can do the bigger ones with more confidence. So local warehousing, we warehouse our stock in Shanghai and Tianjin. Tianjin it's in the north of China. It's about an hour drive south of Beijing. It's sort of often referred to as the port of Beijing because it's right there on the water. We don't own these warehouses. We lease them through other groups. We decided we'd have a Tianjin base as well because we wanted to be able to service northern customers quicker and faster. If you remember our plot map graph, we didn't have a lot of sales up north, and that's something we're really conscious about trying to drive. So like when we're here in Australia and having our products placed in a few different locations, being able to deliver it to the end customer quicker, that's something we're trying to do as well. There's a whole lot of options for warehousing, and when you do investigate it, I really encourage you to go to the 3 or 4, do your due diligence, go to these facilities 3 or 4 times. The first one we signed up with, we went once and we signed the deals and we thought we had a great deal. We thought, oh yeah, because they often organise the pallet rate, the pick and pack rate, the re-stickering, and then your final mile delivery as well. So when we went back, we moved our first container in there, we're all excited, high fives, we got a container into China, and then they turned around and said, oh, that fee, which was 4 RMB, is now 25 RMB. We were pretty screwed at that point in time. So we had to sort of suck it up for a little while and work out, who else is another legitimate player? Who else can we go to try and get around this? And it took us a little while to find it, but there are a lot of players and there are a lot of emerging businesses who will be very legitimate, will be very upfront with you, probably have more Western style practices in terms of sticking to a contract. So when you do go over there, go and see them, go and see about 3 or 4. There's not just going to be, the first one you see probably won't be the one you sign up with. So in terms of getting paid, has anyone heard of Alipay? Yeah. Yep. So Alipay is, I guess, it's the Alibaba version of PayPal. It's really widely used. It's a bit like PayPal here in that it's started as like an e-commerce online payment option, and now you can pay for your cabs with it. You can pay different fees through it. So we have an Alipay account, operates in a very similar way to PayPal. People pay for their products and we withdraw the money. The other really big one in China is UnionPay. Has anyone seen UnionPay stickers? They're sort of popping up a little bit more, and it's a direct result of Australian businesses working out we need to show China that we accept their #1 credit card in China. When New South Wales hosted that Vivid event, anyone know Vivid, with a light show and everything? And they made an effort, they went out to all the cabs and they put these UnionPay stickers on every single cab. And it was in a direct target because they want a Chinese tourist to come out here, come to this event and not have to worry about can I pay or not pay for this taxi. A lot of Chinese consumers and tourists, when they come here, if they don't see these symbols, they simply won't ask and won't say, oh, can I do this? So it's a really important thing for an Australian business, if you were targeting Chinese tourists and Chinese investment, to get up front and highlight that you will accept their most common credit card. When we first went to China about three years ago, they said, oh, you have to accept cash on delivery. It's still really common. So we never accepted it, but it is reasonably commonplace still in some forms that cash on delivery is an accepted payment method. So distribution. I was in a taxi in Shanghai. I hope you can all see that. So there's a whole lot of polystyrene boxes, and there's a little three-wheel bicycle sort of pedaling away there. And so this is one of our biggest concerns. If we're going to start selling fresh beef, so we can get our beef to Shanghai, and then we're sort of relying on this sort of mode of transportation to get the fresh beef to your door. So as the taxi went along, there was this poor girl pedaling a little three-wheel bicycle along the street. And this sort of stuff is reasonably common. You see a lot of this when you're in China. It's sort of a land of contrast. You'll see the three-wheel bicycle that should have been retired 30 years ago with building supplies or bottles of water, and then flying along will be a Porsche Cayenne or a Range Rover or something. It's a really big land of contrast. But this is one of our biggest concerns is the final mile distribution. If you've been to China, you'll recognise that they don't live in houses. Apartments is where they all live in apartments, and these are often they're sort of gated communities as well. So they'll have sort of 3 or 4 of these apartment blocks, and then they'll be sort of protected by walls. And then the busiest person in China now is sort of the manager or the apartment manager who will be looking after these 4 buildings. And every day he get one of these people on a bike who'll ride up with all the Alibaba and Tmall deliveries and hand them over to him, and he's then got to look after them until people come home and pick them up on their way through. Are we running out of time, are we? 5 minutes. Okay, excellent. So just continuing on distribution, there's a company called SF Express. They're the best in terms of reliability. They're also the most expensive. They have a focus more on southern China. It is growing into broader regions of China as well, but if you are looking to look at transport options, I highly recommend you look at SF. China Post are pretty ordinary. We tried them, and they're a bit... Is anyone from Australia Post here? No, they're a bit like Australia Post 4 or 5 years ago. And EMS is actually a China Post owned system called Express Mail System. They're pretty good. So certainly, if you're looking at options, they're really worth investigating as well. So my quick takeaways for you is to always remember China will do what's best for China. So, as my wife says, why don't we just send all our best products there? China looks after their country much the same as Australia does what's best for Australia. So it's really important to remember that with whatever you're doing. I always hate it when I go to conferences and someone said, oh, just spend money on that, just go and do that. It's so easy. It's like, mate, we're a small business. I spend money here, I'm taking from something else, I don't have the money tree out the back. But I really encourage, I'm going to break my rule, I really encourage you to get over to China. If you're genuine about it, you've got to get over it, you've got to experience the people, the culture. It is getting more and more affordable. There's about 5 airlines who fly from Melbourne now, and I think you can get a return flight from between $600 or $800 to China. So I really encourage you to get over. You need to have a 3-year plan with China. People just think, oh, Norco is selling milk for 1 litre for $9. It must be pretty easy. But what you don't see or haven't heard is their 5 years of hard work. Our first year was pretty tough. Our second year is looking a lot better. And we've got some expectations for our 3rd year to continue to expand. So it's not going to be a flash in the pan. This is the biggest consumer marketplace in the world, highly susceptible. You're there with everyone else. So it's really important you have a 3-year plan and you stick to it. Highly recommend you get a Chinese business partner. We were introduced to our Chinese business partner, Bing, who through some other property development friends, and he has helped us in more ways than we can ever imagine. Remember the online marketplaces are dominated by Tmall, so that should be one of the first places you look at. And international goods are a luxury. So, if our food is a real premium offering, if you're selling cosmetics or Australian-made vitamins, they're highly sought after. International products are seen as a real luxury. So that's it from me. I'm happy to take a few questions. Feel free to take my email, phone number. Really keen to see more Aussies get over to China. It's something that we've seen a lot of Australian manufacturing, for instance, go downhill last few years, and I really enjoy the fact that whilst I don't make any food, I help 15 Australian food manufacturers get their product to China, and that might be able to help them in the battle with Coles and Woolies in a few years, hopefully. So, any questions? Oh, nailed it. Awesome. All right, thank you.